People have recreated songs by Radiohead on YouTube before, and they've done a damn good job. But what I see a lot less of is people analyzing their songwriting and production and using that to create an original song in their style. So that's what I'm gonna do today. In Rainbows came out when I had just turned 5 years old, and I've been listening to it pretty much ever since. I know I'm not the only one to say this, but it's my favorite album of all time. I love it so much I've had the album cover on the wall in every studio space I've ever had. But even though I've listened to every song hundreds, if not thousands of times, I've never sat down with my songwriter slash music theory nerd slash producer brain on and just really analyzed what makes it work. So in this video, I'm gonna do that, and my goal is to create a 60-second mini song that could essentially be an 11th song on In Rainbows in an alternate universe. It's a tall order. So first off, we need some kind of foundation for the song that we're gonna make, just like any kind of starting point. Most Radiohead songs start with Tom either writing on the piano or the guitar, and then the rest of the band see themselves sort of as arrangers, turning these ideas into fully produced songs. Honestly though, I've been struggling to come up with good ideas that sound like Radiohead. But one day I was scrolling on Instagram when I came across a reel that my friend Antoine had posted playing the guitar. I was like, interesting. Something about these chords just instantly reminded me of In Rainbows, and I'll explain why shortly. But I messaged Antoine and I told him about this video that I'm making, and he agreed to be a part of it. So he played the chord progression in 4 different ways inspired by specific songs off the album, but I'll let him explain what he did.
Hey, I'm Antoine. I'm an indie music producer based in Montreal, Canada. For this sort of guitar tone, I chose to use the Axe effects with the 5F1 Tweed amp model. It's basically a Fender Tweed. There's no reverb, it sounds super dry, but that's what we want. I'm using a Mexican Strat on the neck pickup. Everything is double tracked and panned hard left and hard right, so we get that magical stereo effect. We're not aiming for perfection with this recording, but more so the raw feeling of it. That's it. Thanks for trusting me with this one, Lucas.
Okay, so let's take these parts and arrange it into the start of a song. I think I know what I'm gonna do. I'm actually gonna combine 2 of them to make kind of like a little 2-part thing. So I'm taking Faustarp and Jigsaw, and what I'm gonna do, they're in different tempos, or tempi, which you would say if you were an insufferable nerd, but they're close enough that I think I can just time stretch one of them to fit the other tempo and get away with it. So I'm gonna do that to Faustarp here. So time warp sample, sync to this tempo, and that should get us, boom. So now we have this Faustarp part in 170. I think that'll flow really nicely into the Jigsaw part. That's a pickup, huh? So this should go here. 1, 2. And you know what? Even though Antoine sent me these double tracked, I think I'm gonna hold out on having the full stereo sound come in until the Jigsaw part. I think the Faustarp part is probably just gonna be panned hard left. Radiohead can get pretty funky in terms of panning on In Rainbows, so I'm gonna try to emulate that at least a little bit here. So I think this is a nice foundation for the song. We have the first bit, which is gonna be a lot more along the lines of like Weird Fishes, Reckoner, Nude. I'm gonna add a lot of beautiful harmonic layers in there, and it's gonna sound really lovely. And then we're gonna get a bit heavier in the second half. I promised a bit earlier I'd talk about these chords and what makes them sound like Radiohead. The next minute or so is going to be a little nerdy, but I think it's a huge part of the In Rainbows, or more broadly the Radiohead sound, so it was worth mentioning. Here are the chords in this progression. The most obvious thing you'll probably notice is that they're all 9th chords, 3 major 9ths and 1 minor 9th. And if you know your theory, you'll say, hold on, each key only has 2 diatonic major 9th chords. So yes, this progression is not entirely diatonic. And for those of you who didn't just have 4 years of Bach shoved down your throats, all that means is that it's not entirely in one single key. So here are the Roman numerals for this progression, and you'll see that the second chord is a flat 7th, which is a major, or in this case major 9th chord built on the lowered 7th scale degree. What this does is gives the progression just a little hint of ambiguity. I definitely see this progression as being in E with just a little hint of Mixolydian flavor thrown in with that flat 7th. But because it's the second chord in the progression, we're immediately pulled away from that E tonal center after the 1 chord. But it's not super jarring though, because every chord is just a little bit more ambiguous because of the 7th and 9th extensions. So to summarize, use extensions, keep everything ambiguous. Bonus points if you can make music theory nerds argue over whether it's Dorian or Aeolian or Mixolydian. So in my mind, it makes sense that the next thing that I should lay down should be the drums. A lot of the feel across In Rainbows is derived from the percussion. So in terms of how I'm going to approach my drums, for the kick, tom, and snare, I'm going to use this plugin DrumLab by Native Instruments. And then for all of the cymbals, for the hat, ride, and crash, I'm going to use my sample pack, Lucas Fournier Indie Folk Cymbals. So I have a whole video about my philosophy on this, but my whole thing is that cymbals are the hardest things to get right, and they often don't sound very good coming straight out of a VST. So for that reason, I actually I bought my own cymbals. But I know if I used my cymbals, you guys would be like, man, I don't have cymbals, so I can't make my thing sound this good. So I'm not even going to use, I'm not going to touch them, and instead I'm going to use my sample pack. And my hope is that you'll see how good it is, and you'll want to use it yourself. So I have my sample pack pulled up on the left, and what's so cool about it, if I do say so myself, is that it has a lot more one-shots than almost any other sample pack. So for every different type of hit, there's like 4 to 6 different velocities, and they're numbered. So 1 is like the lightest hit, and 5 is the heaviest hit, and everything in between. So the idea is that when you're making an arrangement, you'll combine multiple of them to get like a more realistic sound, because when a drummer is hitting a drum, they don't just hit it the same way over and over again. They hit it like a different kind of slightly different hit each time with the stick, right? So that's what we're emulating here. So I'm adding some ride hits on the 2 and the 4 here. And then I'm hearing some hats during the jigsaw part. Okay, so we have our hat and ride pattern. I'm going to assign it to the mixer tracks now. I'll keep adjusting it as we go through. So I think I'm going to use this Stereo Beauty kit from DrumLab for the rest of the sounds. And I've just turned the reverb right off. The sounds of the drums on In Rainbows are incredibly dry. Just gonna start with a little 4-bar loop of drums, and then we'll add some fills, make it more complex as we go along. So I'm going heavy on the side sticks here because that's very, very weird Fishes-esque. Okay, so I experimented around a little bit, and here's what I came up with. So we have the snares that are being played by DrumLab, and then I used kicks from Jake Reed's Super Dead Drums pack. Those sound like this. Just really dead, dry kicks. If you listen to a lot of the songs in Rainbows, the kicks are not super prominent at all. For the snare part, we have this side stick pattern that turns into a snare hitting on the 2 and the 4. The hat stays the same in both sections, but it just grows a little bit. I just increase the volume. It's a little more intense there. And I also use my sample pack for the rides and the crashes. We have this little ride bell into a crash thing that happens every 4 bars. And to announce the new section, we have the ride and the crash hitting together. So I think it's really coming along. Next, let's add some bass. So I'm not a good bassist by any stretch, so this is going to be interesting. I'm just gonna mess around a little bit and see if any ideas come to me. I record my bass direct in, of course. And yeah, I'll experiment around with amp sims a bit later on, probably. So I'm gonna use the UAD Ampeg bass amp. I just compress the bass into a limiter. I just don't want too much dynamic variation on it. I want it to always be kind of consistent. We have the main instruments and groove down now, so we need to start thinking about melody, which is honestly really tough to approach. After some critical listening, I realized that Tom's vocal melodies across In Rainbows follow a really interesting rule. If the instrumentation at a given moment is really complex melodically and/or harmonically, the vocal melody is really simple, and vice versa. For example, 15 Steps starts off with just a drum beat. So when the vocal melody comes in, it's complex melodically because it's the only source of melodic and harmonic information. But later when the guitar and the bass line come in and they're doing all this complicated stuff, the vocal takes a back seat and becomes incredibly simple melodically, like one note simple. Our song is pretty jam-packed with harmonic and melodic information, so I'm just gonna keep the vocal melody really simple. All right, so let's lay down some vocals. I'm just gonna record and see what happens. And from that recording, I'm sure there's gonna be little bits of melodies and little bits of lyrics that I like and that will stick. And then I'm gonna go away for a while, take my time, write out some lyrics, come back, do the final vocals. So by the way, it is a new day. I made a few changes to just the first section. I laid down this really simple drum beat instead of the rides on the 2 and the 4. I had some bass along with that, so the first section now sounds like this. I'm gonna be using my universal audio sphere, which I use for literally everything. The beauty of this microphone is that it can emulate other microphones. I did a little research and found that Tom uses U47s at least sometimes in the studio, so that's what I'm gonna go off of, and I'm gonna use that as my main vocal mic, or an emulation of the U47. So yeah, I'm just muttering things, but I like that melody. All right, I wrote some lyrics, which you're gonna see on screen in a second because I don't remember them, so I'm gonna be looking at them on my screen. But yeah, I'm ready to record the lead vocal. I'm gonna do 4 or 5 takes. We'll see how it goes, and then I'm gonna comp the lead vocal out of those takes. Built it brick by brick to make up for lost time. Yeah, I'm just gonna go through and I'm gonna comp all these. That's boring, so I'll see you on the other side. All right, I'm back. We have a comped vocal. So at the very beginning, it sounds like this. And the second half sounds like this. So a couple of things you see, I've divided the lead into Vox lead 1 and lead 2. So the first bit was just so quiet and soft and falsetto that I needed to process it a bit differently. I've done slightly different EQ and compressor settings, so I just put it on 2 different tracks to do that. Processing wise, you'll also see that I've routed each track to 2 reverbs. I have a main reverb using Round by Native Instruments, but then I also have a secondary larger reverb using Little Plate by Sound Toys. I was experimenting around with the reverb plugins that I have and that I use, and Little Plate seemed to get the closest to the sound. It's a very digital sounding reverb in Rainbows. Everything else in the arrangement is so dry, and then Tom's vocals are really, really washed out with reverb. But if you just take a massive reverb with a huge decay and you just have that going the whole time, the vocal's gonna get incredibly muddy. So you'll see what I've done is I've just automated the reverb in, usually at the ends of phrases, just little spikes of reverb to finish out a phrase. Also, you'll see up here, I used AI to get Tom York to sing this. But you'll have to wait to hear what that sounds like until the end of this video. I'm gonna record a few doubles and harmonies now. In Rainbows is often a very live sounding album, so any harmonies and oohs and vocal doubles and stuff, you basically want it to be so that it can be sung by Ed on stage if need be. Yeah, I'm just gonna go through it. I'm gonna add a few subtle things that I think you're gonna add quite a bit. And keys, I wanted you to fall. I hear a little call and response thing in this second part here. Alright, so I've made this choral part, 6 parts, all panned to the right. And they're also routed to this big reverb, which is panned left, so there's a cool stereo effect. Everything's starting to take shape, and now it's just a matter of turning this song into a final polished production. Honestly, if there's one key takeaway I want you to have from this video, it's what I'm about to describe. So remember the rule I just talked about earlier with the vocal melodies? This also applies to Radiohead's arrangements as a whole on this album. Radiohead are masters of creating arrangements that are incredibly unique and intriguing and compelling, but aren't overwhelming. They let any weird, rhythmic, harmonic, melodic, or sonic choices breathe. And because of that, everything exists in this cohesive space that is otherworldly and entirely unique, but is also accessible. In my opinion, here's the main way they achieve that. Whenever something is complex or weird, everything else around it is simple or normal. Let's listen to the beginning of All I Need, maybe the most conventional song on the album. It has a super simple beat and melody. I'm the next step. But the bass has an absolutely wild, distorted sound. So All I Need is rhythmically, harmonically, and melodically simple, but sonically complex. And the entire album is a delicate dance like this. So as I finish my arrangement, I want to have this concept in mind. All right, we're on to the home stretch. And if you don't think I can get it done, I just have to remind you to believe in believe. So applying the theory I just told you about to our song, yeah, there's just not enough weird sounds. So let's make some weird sounds. The plan is to predominantly or maybe exclusively make weird sounds with a guitar. Johnny Greenwood is like a master of guitar extended techniques using EBOs and other various instruments and contraptions. I don't have an EBO. What I do have, however, is a 100 yen coin. And there's something very, very cool that I can do with this, which Johnny Greenwood pretty much coined. So you take the coin, you pull up some amp that typically has distortion and or a lot of reverb, and then you just kind of scratch the coin against the string, and it's absolutely wild. So this is famously kind of like the lead sound on House of Cards, and you'd best believe I'm doing it here. Now, another thing I know we need is some kind of slightly more distorted guitar counter melody-esque thing in this second half. Not quite that distorted. That's a nice tone. Antoine sent me the chord charts. This is what I'm looking at right now. I have to do one chord at a time. I think I'm gonna make this really mid-rangey. All right, I just want one more bit of weirdness. All right, this is the kind of EQ curve that you only see during intense sound design processes, but I like it. I think this might be done. It is indeed done. Also, I'll just quickly mention I am a music producer for indie artists. So if you're interested in working together in that capacity, i.e. me producing your song, there's a link in the description where you can hear some of my work and fill out a form to get in touch. All that said, let's have a listen to the final song. Thank you so much for your support, and I'll catch you next time.